It is Friday, September 18th. Let's talk PlayStation. This is the week we've all been waiting for when it came to PlayStation 5 news. That PS5 Showcase finally gave us price, release date, launch games, launch details, pre-orders going up prematurely. Now they're all gone. There's a lot to cover here from this past week, a lot of stories to talk about, so bear with me. But as always, we'll start with our PS Plus reminder. The September games are still available. You have a little under or around 2 weeks left to download these games or add them to your library, so make sure you do that. And to start off with a smaller story here, a brief update on the Uncharted movie. The actor Tom Holland, who's playing young Nathan Drake, posted on Instagram Live that he's really enjoying how the film's shaping up and all the scenes that they're doing. He actually got a bruise from one of them. But the real controversy here is that we have a photo that has leaked allegedly from the set with Mark Wahlberg, and he's supposed to be playing a younger Sully, and he has no mustache on that face, so it looks like authenticity has been thrown out the window on this production. Not that we had any sort of real optimism going into this. I think we all have low expectations about this film adaptation, but you can't have Sully without a mustache, right? So not only is Mark Wahlberg kind of a polarizing option for this character, but I don't know, as minor as this may seem, it's like, alright, well, this already isn't looking too hot. Now, moving on to something that would probably be considered more disappointing is Ken Bridge of Spirits. This was recently delayed to the first quarter of 2021. Originally, it was slated for holiday 2020, so presumably they were aiming for PS5's launch, which we now know is November 12th or November 19th, depending on where you live, which is coming up soon, right? A little under 2 months now at this point, so it's coming up fast. And, due to the ongoing pandemic, much like other developers, they're having a tough transition from that work-from-home workflow, so they just need a little more time in the oven. It's not a huge delay. If it's needed, obviously, they should go ahead and do it. But anyway, next up, we've got another PS4 to PS5 upgrade confirmed here, which is Borderlands 3. So it will get a PlayStation 5 native version, and if you are a current owner, you'll get the next-gen version for free. That'll have 4K, 60, all the bells and whistles. They're actually also patching the current version of the game to offer some vertical split screen, so that's a much-needed feature that many people have been asking for that game for couch co-op. So that's coming to current owners, but you will have a free version going into PlayStation 5 when you decide to buy that console. And while it is great to see that we have another major third-party offering upgrades to PS5, this has still not pushed 505 Games into any meaningful direction for changing their stance on control upgrades from PS4 to PS5. One thing we saw this week was current Deluxe Edition owners being upgraded for free by accident to the newly released Ultimate Edition, the copy of the game that they said you had to buy in order to be entitled to an upgrade from PS4 to PS5. This was by accident. Then they took away those entitlements because obviously they didn't want to do that, and they still stuck by their stance that this is what you have to do if you want to get the next upgrade. So if you're a current owner of the game, long before this recent release of the Ultimate Edition, you're still not going to be getting a free upgrade. Rather disappointing to see how 505 and Remedy is handling this, but again, I think Remedy might have their hands tied, and this is more 505's doing more than anything else. Next up, PS5 console launch exclusive and PS5 launch game, Godfall, has gone gold, as in the game is pretty much finished and ready to be printed to disc. As far as I can see, this is one of our first examples of a PlayStation 5 game that is 100% ready to go to hit PlayStation 5's launch date, so it's a small but meaningful milestone. This game is still in a weird area where initially it had a decent amount of buzz around it just because it was the first publicly revealed and acknowledged PlayStation 5 game, but now that we know about everything else from other third parties, PlayStation Studios' first and second party, this game has immediately gone to more of a Rise, Son of Rome, or an Order 1886, somewhere around there, and to be honest, I do feel as though the game will probably sit around that area when it actually does come out. But maybe it'll also have more reverence down the road when people decide to pick it up for a cheaper price or something like that. But as always, we'll have to wait and see when the game actually comes out. Now, moving on to our PlayStation 5 Showcase Aftermath. We had that event on Wednesday, gave us all the details about PS5. We did a video that day of, recapping all the announcements from the event, and a few details that came out right after the showcase, but between then and now, there's even more things that we can talk about beyond what we discussed in that video, so that's what we'll do here. And one thing we learned is PlayStation 5's official console dimensions. So we've been talking for a bit. How large is this thing going to be? Because it looks very sizable, and sure enough it is. So for official dimensions, picture this console laying horizontally. I think most people will probably lay it horizontally. We're looking at 390 millimeters, or about 1 foot and 2 inches wide. In terms of how tall it is, so from the bottom of the machine to that top panel there, 104 millimeters, or about 4 inches. And then depth from the front of the console to the back where the ports are, 260 millimeters, or about 10 inches. So this thing is definitely going to be a very large console, keep that in mind. It always sometimes seems a little weird to say, like, make sure you have your setup ready for this thing, when really it's just an electronic, you're going to figure out how to place it somewhere and plug it in. But realistically, this might have some issues fitting in certain TV cabinets or stands that you might have. I know I am going to have to do some slight rearranging, but I also got to do some cable management back there anyway, so it's a good excuse for me to probably get back there and clean that up a bit. Although it is worth noting that this is for the disc console, so the digital one is a little bit shorter, and also these numbers do not include the console's white clamshell overhangs. So essentially it might be a little bit wider than the numbers that we actually just threw out here, and it's also not including the stand in these dimensions as well. So again, there's a little bit of height that's not really accounted for if you go vertically or horizontal for this machine. But that's another news story here, which is the stand is in fact included with every single PlayStation 5. That was a slight concern here because normally with Sony consoles, they offer a vertical stand, but it's never included. It's usually like $20, $25, something like that. However, for PlayStation 5, it seems pretty obvious it needs the stand for both orientations. So nice to see that no matter what you buy, especially for that digital console where it seems very top heavy if you go for a vertical orientation, it is included with every single console. Now, moving on to our next news story, this was unsurprisingly overshadowed by everything else, but still very meaningful, which is that the 2018 Spider-Man is getting remastered on PlayStation 5, or really getting more of a native PlayStation 5 version. Really just depends on the nomenclature attached to it at this point, but essentially, this is getting the full PS5 treatment, and this really is our first current PS4 exclusive that is getting PlayStation 5 native enhancements, and it's getting all the bells and whistles, so DualSense features, faster loading, updated assets for all the characters, the environments, ray tracing. You're going to get 4K 60, that performance setting if you do want to opt for that instead, just like what Miles Morales is going to be offering as well. And as of right now, there is no discussion of a free upgrade for current owners, just that if you buy the Ultimate Edition for Spider-Man Miles Morales, you do get a remastered version of the 2018 game. You have to figure that this will be offered at a separate point in time, or they'll clear up these details later on. But as of right now, at least the only way to get that 2018 Spider-Man on PS5 is to buy the Ultimate Edition of Spider-Man Miles Morales. Which this might seem initially disappointing, although it is worth noting we finally have examples from Sony themselves about offering free upgrades for their games. Because remember, all we have so far is just a lot of third parties. Most of them are free, some of them are a small paid difference, and some of them you have to buy the game all over again. But for Sony, after the PS5 Showcase, we learned Horizon Forbidden West, Sackboy Big Adventure, and Spider-Man Miles Morales are PS4 games as well, and all three of those are free upgrades from PS4 to PS5. There is some slight miscommunication, but those are free upgrades from PS4 to 5. The odd man out is the 2018 Spider-Man. The only way to get that is through buying the Ultimate Edition of Miles Morales. So a little strange there, but in all likelihood, this will either be just exclusive to that one upgrade path for a while up until they say it's a free upgrade, or until they say it's a paid separate game. We'll just have to wait and see on which one they decide, but judging from the other three examples we have, it might still be free. Next up, Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Jim Ryan was speaking with GameIndustry.biz and the Washington Post about the PlayStation 5 Showcase, answering questions, a lot of details and quotes to go over here. We'll start with this one, which is the PlayStation 5's UI. We did not see any of this during the Showcase event. We saw a minor tease during the See the Future event, so where is it? This is something where Jim Ryan did not give us much insight, because he pretty much reconfirmed what we already know, which is we haven't shown yet any of the user experience of the PS5, and there's some really cool stuff to come on that. So thanks, Jim. That doesn't really tell us much of anything, although we are less than 2 months away from this console launching. So if it's not within the next few days or week, it's probably a few weeks out from now. But really, this just brings up the argument of how does PS5 news look moving forward? Because I think it's safe to say we won't have a more specialized live stream like this or the See the Future event. There's a certain expectation attached with those type of announcements. So I think moving forward, we might see another State of Play. Obviously, there's still high expectations for a State of Play, but that is slightly more casual of a setting where you expect just a lot of gameplay trailers and things like that, not necessarily hardware-related announcements, but that is still a place where you could insert you know, a 4 or 5 minute demonstration of the UI, but there could be a PlayStation blog write-up which links to a video to YouTube, and that's where we'll see more about the UI or something to that effect, right? But we probably might not get a more specialized live stream like the ones that we've had so far. Now, in unsurprising news, Jim Ryan has once again reiterated the PlayStation strategy and why it doesn't really work for what is the Xbox Game Pass formula, directly responding to Microsoft's strategy for their consoles and discussing why that doesn't work for what Sony's trying to accomplish. He was quoted saying, "Our pitch, as you've heard, is new games, great games. We have had this conversation before. We are not going to go down the road of putting new releases titles into a subscription model. These games cost many millions of dollars, well over 100 million, to develop. We just don't see that as sustainable. We want to make the games bigger and better, and hopefully at a stage more persistent. So putting those into a subscription model on day one for us just doesn't make any sense. For others in a different situation, it might well make sense, but for us, it doesn't." That quote could not be more direct and cut and dry about what is the reality of the PlayStation business model, and it's something we've discussed here before Sony even really responded to this. I think the video we did was like Xbox Game Pass versus PS Now, how you can't really compare the two, and a large part of why you can't really compare the two is the PlayStation strategy. Big budget, high caliber, $60 video games, I guess going into PS5, $70 video games, but these are titles that can move 5, 10, 15 million copies over their life cycle on the market. And so putting that into a subscription price monthly, it really doesn't work out. I mean, certainly there is a tipping point versus how well these games are projected to do versus how many subscribers you could potentially have. But even Microsoft, from what we're hearing, is struggling to make Game Pass profitable or really make sense. But if you look at the budgets for some of their first-party games and potentially the royalties or lump sums that they're paying to third parties, we don't have those numbers, of course, but depending on those numbers and how they're crunched out, I mean, it might look okay for them versus Sony could be leaving a lot of money on the table by handing out these games through a subscription price like PlayStation Plus or PlayStation Now. It just really wouldn't make sense, and for the foreseeable future, it still won't make sense. Now, dialing back a little bit to the PS5 showcase, where we learned after the event there were some PS5 games that are getting PS4 versions, and that took a lot of momentum away from Sony's continued messaging of believing in generations, PS5 exclusive experiences. Well, Jim Ryan did respond to this. He says, "No one should be disappointed. The PS5 versions of those games are built from the ground up to take advantage of the PS5 feature set, and we have an upgrade path for PS4 users to get the PS5 versions for free. It's about people having choice. I'm really quite pleased about the situation." This is not really the best thing to say here, and honestly, there's no good way to put it because they're going to get flack for it, just like Microsoft's continued heat for their support of Xbox One a year to 2 years into the Series S and X lifecycle. So obviously, Sony's going to see the same level of flack, possibly more, for what is backwards messaging now that we've learned about some continued PS4 support from their first party. Although it's important that we understand the differences when we talk about support and the level of support beyond these, you know, what would be considered legacy machines a year to 2 years into the next generation of consoles. It would be first-party games. Third party can do whatever they want, and there's a certain level of support beyond just shipping first-party games. We're going to be talking about that in a second here. At least for PlayStation, we're looking at 3 PlayStation Studio games, one of them being second-party from Sumo Digital. That's Sackboy Big Adventure, and as I've explained, I think most people would agree, negligible. I don't think anybody's really concerned about that game being on PS4 and PS5. That's like Little Big Planet 3 on PlayStation 4 and 3 back in the day. What we have is Spider-Man Miles Morales, a game that is really going to ship a lot of copies on both these platforms. So from a business standpoint, you can clearly see what they were doing there. We know they've benchmarked the 2018 game on PS5. That explains why we're seeing a native version of that game. So it seems pretty clear that Insomniac has a good level of scalability built for that particular game. But the most disappointing one here, and really our oddball out, would be Horizon Zero Dawn, a game that's slated for 2021, so some sizable distance away from PlayStation 4, and yet it will still be available for that console. And it's a game that arguably could benefit the most from PlayStation 5 being shipped just on that console alone. But this is the problem when we talk about scalability. While we are in a generation or 2 generations over where it's the same architecture, there's SDK advancements, and obviously we've got SSDs as the minimum moving forward, but there is a certain level of scalability, but as developers will often tell you, it's easier to go up than it is to go down. And so when you're building a game from PlayStation 5 from the ground up, depending on how you approach that game, it may be more difficult to go backwards. For something like Horizon, I would agree that it is somewhat disappointing because it really tells me that they might not be able to be as ambitious with certain things like mountable flying robotics in the sky or those underwater environments that we are looking forward to. We know that's a thing. You know, maybe those are going to be more shallow than we initially think. It's really tough to say, of course, because we don't know about the true scope of the game. Obviously, Horizon shipped on PlayStation 4 in 2017 just fine. It's a fantastic game. It's just a matter of how much more do they want to accomplish and do for the sequel. Will PlayStation 4 really hold that back? It really depends on the game more than anything else, right? If it's a smaller game, then you can ship on as many platforms as possible and you're probably fine. But if it's a more ambitious project, then you may run into bottlenecks with what would be your lowest common denominator. And for PS4 and 5, PS4 would be your lowest common denominator. So Horizon will probably be our last major PlayStation 4 game out of Sony's first party, because there is a difference in the amount of support that we need to talk about here, because Sony did reiterate their support for PlayStation 4. So Jim Ryan, when talking about PS4, he said, "It will be tens of millions strong, and we have never been closer to them than this year. We intend to keep that going and love and respect the PS4 community, while at the same time recognizing that millions of gamers are ready to and want to move into a world of game experiences that are only possible on PS5. He said that on GameIndustry.biz. Speaking with the Washington Post, he elaborates, "The PS4 community will continue to be incredibly important to us for 3 or 4 years. Many will transition to PS5, and we hope we do our job well, but tens of millions will still be engaged with the PS4. What's so problematic about these quotes is that they're tied directly to the revelation about these PS5 games having PS4 games, so people are getting really mixed up about what that support really looks like. But really, this couldn't be more predictable. We've seen this with Sony for every single console launch they've ever done, which is 3-4 years of support into the next machine is continuing to manufacture, selling dev kits, offering developer support, servicing these consoles for repairs, warranty repairs, things like that, leaving the network up, PlayStation Store support up, which those things will actually go much further beyond 3-4 years. That's what that really means. So you can expect PlayStation 4 manufacturing, if we're in 2020, to probably cease or cut off around 2024, somewhere around there. You might see them cease warranty repairs in 2026 or 2027, and arguably you could see PlayStation Store and PSN support, online play support for PlayStation 4 consoles specifically well past 2030. We're still looking at PlayStation 3 for those specific features in 2020 right now. But anyway, moving on to the PlayStation 5 pre-order debacle. I'm sure you're well aware of what's happening at this point. All the consoles are gone. So much for that pre-order notice that we were going to be given. And if you recall, during the Jeff Keighley DualSense live stream where he was speaking to the head of global marketing, Eric Lempel, he was responding to that rumor about pre-orders going up at a moment's notice, saying that wasn't going to happen, that we would be given advance notice. And then we had the PS5 showcase on Wednesday, being told that pre-orders would go up the following day, September 17th. That was yesterday. And you may have watched that showcase and then thought, oh, okay, I'll go to work, go to bed, run some errands. By the time you actually came back, all the consoles are gone shortly after the live stream. Walmart was one of the first ones to start taking them. Then GameStop was taking in-store pre-orders. Multiple websites started going up left and right, so there was really no proper indication of knowing which ones were going to be up at what time, and so it was just a total mess. All the consoles are already gone. Amazon was like one of the last ones, and that's where we're at right now. Every single machine, more or less, was probably snatched up before we actually got to September 17th, like they said. What's problematic here is that it was a one-day notice, and so, I mean, what Microsoft did was give a week notice, so clearly they conveyed a lot of information to retailers, probably behind the scenes, or even right after that public announcement, right? Even when it becomes public, if you say it's a week out, you don't release that allocation information to your partners, they're not going to start taking orders. And so this is something where it was just way too close to when pre-orders would actually go up, and that's what probably caused a lot of issues here, of most stores just pretty much going ahead and accepting it at whatever point they felt they were going to actually open them. So it was really more of a moment's notice thing. There's no sugarcoating this. Totally bogus. Obviously, a lot of people were really looking forward to this console launch, saving up. Some people, this was going to be their first day one console, and they were super excited. So it's immensely disappointing. The only bonus here, if there is one, is that this will be an ongoing allotment. So this is fairly predictable with most other console launches, where as Sony continues the manufacturing process and they get a better idea of how many machines that they are going to be able to supply to these stores, pre-orders will open up again periodically between all these different sites and major retail partners. The only problem is that it is going to be a moment's notice from here on out, from this day up until launch. We've already seen, I think Walmart, Best Buy and Target reopened for a very short time. And I think Amazon actually reopened a second time, if I'm not mistaken. But we're already seeing second allocations go up. And so you're going to see more down the road, but you do have to be vigilant. Follow Wario64 on Twitter. He's a great source for that. He gets them up right away. I try to tweet them out as well, but I'm not as quick, so you might want to go follow him. But if I run into links, I try to tweet them out as well, just to get them out there to help anybody out that might want to make sure that they get a PS5 on day one. Now, the thing is, that was all on Wednesday, right? Well, on Monday, we had another Bloomberg report that stated that Sony was looking to cut PS5 production by about 4 million units due to low SoC yields. So potentially the company was looking at a failure rate of up to 50% on the SoC, which is disappointing and not great to hear, but essentially the report claimed that they were looking to make 15 million consoles. Now that's down to 11 million up to the first quarter of 2021. And this is a bit strange because the last Bloomberg report that we had stated that Sony was looking to double production from 5 to 10 million units. Now we're hearing that it's 15 million, cutting 4 million. That would still be 11 million systems without any sort of news that they upped it from 10 to 15. A little strange there, but either way, Sony actually already came out and denied this report the following day, which pretty much tells you that they want to be swift and adamant about clearing up a lot of these misconceptions about the platform, and certainly this goes right into the accountability with the shareholders for Sony Corp when it comes to something like manufacturing their, high caliber product coming at the end of 2020. So there is a lot of accountability there for them making sure that they squash some of these rumors. And this does actually go into what we heard from Jim Ryan when talking to the Washington Post after the showcase event, where he did confirm there would be more PS5s this holiday season than what we saw for PS4 back in 2013. That's great to hear, and really, if we do look at the reported initial numbers from Bloomberg, even accounting for maybe that they got something wrong with this recent report, Sony sold 4.2 million PlayStation 4s worldwide for just 2013, which was really about a month and a half on the market. Now, if we get even 5 million consoles for this holiday season, we're already ahead of PlayStation 4 in terms of availability. If they're able to get any more of those machines from this targeted number of upwards of 10 million consoles, overseas fast enough, then there'll be even more machines to go around for people to buy. I mean, we had 7 million PlayStation 4s sold, a little over 7 million sold by the end of March 2014. So with the targeted numbers that we're looking at, it's obvious that Sony wants to meet as much demand as they possibly can. And obviously, anytime pre-orders go up, they're gone right away. And this will even happen for Xbox. I mean, they're brand new consoles. So, I mean, there's going to be people that are going to want to buy these things up very quickly. But, it's good to hear at least that there should be a lot of machines, or as much as there possibly can be, far beyond what we saw with PlayStation 4. And actually, that's also another minor piece of news here. The senior analyst at Nico Partners, Daniel Maude, noticed that Sony booked about 60 flights or potentially 60 aircrafts for October into November for what you would assume is shipping PlayStation 5 consoles overseas. Remember, that's another challenge here, not just manufacturing, it's the logistics of actually shipping these things to your retail partners in time so you can ship via air. It's more expensive, but you can do it a little faster, whereas you ship by boat, that would be slower, and Sony's probably doing that in combo with shipping them over flight as well. Anyway, moving on, another thing that we learned from Jim Ryan this week is that PlayStation 5's pricing was apparently decided as early as this year, or the start of this year. More or less, the company knew right away they wanted to offer a PlayStation 5 that was the same price as PlayStation 4 back in 2013, and so that's how they came to the digital edition pricing, because obviously something would have had to give. Granted, you don't save that money from removing the disk drive, but they did get very aggressive with that pricing to make sure that they reached a $399 price tag. There was still that narrative that they were back and forth, and there was a certain middle ground I feel they were probably sticking to. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. They had a price target in mind, but assuming that anything got in the way, which COVID played a big role here, if they were perhaps slightly out of position compared to Microsoft, a last-minute decision might have been at play there, but again, it would be $50 at the most. There's a certain level of a steer in this direction, but at the end of the day, the company clearly had a target in mind, and I think that's more what Jim Ryan's referring to here. For our next news story, Jim Ryan talks about backwards compatibility, and I think this is the first time the company has directly responded to PS1, 2, and 3 compatibility on PlayStation 5. Remember, it's just been a bunch of dodging. The Ubisoft thing was 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, something like that. But in a conversation with Famitsu, this is translated from Japanese, but he says here, "We keep in mind the engineering specialized for the PS5 as we produce the device. In the midst of that, the PS4 already has 100 million players. We thought they ought to want to play PS4 titles on the PS5 as well indeed, so we included compatibility with PS4. While implementing that, we also focused our efforts on taking in the high-speed SSD and the new controller DualSense at the same time, so unfortunately, we couldn't reach the implementation of such capabilities." If you want to know why PlayStation 5 will not play PS1, 2, or 3 games, I did a very thorough separate video on that. I'll link it down below. We do not have time to get into that here. Now, as a jumping off point, Sony also confirmed, or Jim Ryan also confirmed, that for PlayStation 4 games, they're at about a 99% compatibility. So like we were expecting, the vast majority of titles will work. That 1%, probably less than 1%, is more than likely fringe cases, games that use special accessories or for whatever reason may have had a random issue, you know, at a halfway point in the game, or the developer's unresponsive and trying to fix whatever issues that might be out there. Either way, 99% amongst 4,000 some odd titles. Obviously, once the console launches, I'm sure that 1% will show up in terms of people being vocal about that game not actually working the way it's intended, but otherwise, it seems like the vast majority of PS4 games will work. Next up, it looks like Sony made a mistake on the Demon's Souls messaging for the exclusivity of this game, because we saw the gameplay trailer at the event this past Wednesday. Looked great. Once that same trailer went up on their YouTube channel, towards the end of it, it actually implied it was coming to PC and potentially other platforms at a later date. The trailer was then taken down. Sony followed up stating that this was all made in human error. So as of right now, it's still a full PlayStation 5 exclusive. They own the IP, so, well, granted, they could also still allow it to go to PC. We've seen them do this before, but at least for other consoles, we know that they own this IP. If they did release in other consoles, that would be polarizing or imply that they actually had a minority stake in the IP, because there are other publishers that have shipped Demon's Souls in other territories. But as of right now, at least, if you caught this news story in between or anything like that, the final update here is that this was made in human error. And this also shows you why we sometimes can't overanalyze branding and messaging and labels and things like that, because a lot of times the people involved can make mistakes just like anybody else. And oddly enough, this is kind of the same deal for Final Fantasy 16, where it implied that this was coming to PC day and date. Now it appears as though this might be a full PlayStation 5 exclusive just for the first 6 months, or potentially longer than that, and then it would come to PC, and then it would come to other consoles. So it's not super clear what exclusivity deal is in place for Final Fantasy 16, but as a minor update for the footage that we saw, Square Enix basically said our next update for this game would be in 2021. Which is close, but it's just a matter of at what point in 2021. I mean, this is the one game in that showcase where it wasn't actually running on a PlayStation 5. And again, in typical Square fashion, this game's probably further out than we think, but I think best case scenario, we're looking at 2022 for that game. And also, not a huge update, but we did see the final retail box for PlayStation 5, the disc and digital models. The digital one's a black box, disc model white box. I think it looks pretty good. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but this is the kind of stuff that I am also interested in. I'm one of those people that doesn't throw out the box once I get the console. This is what takes up a substantial amount of space in my home, because I've got so much PlayStation hardware, and now I'll have, you know, these to add to the collection, more or less. But I know I'm not the only one that does this. With all that out of the way, it's time to get to Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel in a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about with you all. Very busy week, of course. Monday we did have a new unboxing, actually, and that was super cool, because I got like 13 or 14 brand new games, and it was a mystery lot, but I got tons of like sealed games, so that was super cool. Saturday we predicted the Wednesday event. That's pointless because now we have the event, so there's recap, impressions. Then I showed you my genuine reactions to that event as a separate video. That was yesterday. And now just more PlayStation 5 news and coverage as it comes up. I'm still sitting on a few projects that can't be completed until we learn more details about PS5, so I've got a few videos waiting, just pending whatever Sony decides to confirm about the user interface and things like that. But otherwise, we'll just keep up on the PS5 watch 2020, and that's essentially it. So thank you so much for watching. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.